one of the things that I set out when we built StartUp Disruptors was actually to bring the generations together across the city. I think it's really valuable to actually look at how people who are as old as me can actually help people as young as Ben and Charlie to start and succeed. But also what we were seeing was a lot of disenchantment with the public sector stuff and support that was out there for business support. So I'm going to start today by telling you a bit of a long and a winding story, a little bit about the background. Some of you know me really well, or think you know me really well. Some of you don't know me really well. So I thought it was only fair that I expose myself horrendously in front of a public arena and audience and being filmed at the same time to let you know a little bit about what we do. When I wake up in the morning, I continuously ask myself what I can do to improve the world and leave it in a better state each night before I go to bed. That sounds like a really lofty ambition, but my brain is wired totally differently to other people's. We only really have each other, love, community and compassion, and that to me is what truly matters in the world. That should lead every single thing that we do as human beings. This is my strong core purpose and belief. My core purpose is to simply do what's right, even when nobody else is watching. We are born astride the grave is a very famous saying, and we all come into the world with nothing, and you know what? We all leave it with nothing, and that's a great leveler in life. As part of this presentation today, I will talk about StartUp Disruptors and why it has become a mission and a movement to change business for good, and why that should matter to everybody in this room and all of us globally. So I'm going to start at the very beginning, so that you have some context of how I see the world, how my childhood and my family shaped all that I did, and how my ancestors had already built my future runway before I was even born, and why I'm perhaps driven in the way that I absolutely am. Guess which one I am? Anybody? Right. Yep, that's me. So I was born in inner city Leicester in 1971, at home at 15 King Edward Road. This house is on the edge of the now infamous Rowletts Hill Council Estate in Leicester. My sister, here on the left-hand side, is 18 months older than me, so yet again she beat me to the punch and was already on the scene. Like a lot of siblings, we're absolutely chalk and cheese. But when you grow up in a big city and you're a working class kid, you learn very quickly how to adapt, how to survive, and your family and community are absolutely everything. There's a sense of looking after each other because your survival as a working class family will depend on it. In the house where I was born, my parents had no carpets, no washing machine, and no central heating. Because, do you know what? They couldn't afford it. My mother recently told me a story about the fact that she bought a bargain cheap off-cut carpet for my bedroom when I was learning to crawl because she didn't want me getting splinters from the bare floorboards in my knees. She had later noticed that my knees and washable nappy were very dirty and discoloured and wondered what on earth I'd been up to. Let's just say that the guy had sold her the carpet clearly wasn't a good man, and he'd seen the opportunity to take hard-earned money off a young mum and exploit her. And he did. It will become clear through this presentation that a theme of social justice, fairness and honesty, and a very strong dislike, borderline hatred, will actually, of those that exploit others for their own ends in business, will become apparent through my forming a community that will protect people against the exploitation of the most vulnerable in society at StartUp Disruptors. But I've digressed again. Let's get back to the story. Who do you think these two people are? Anyone? Dan might know. This is my mum and dad. My mother and father were both teachers and met when they were 19 years old at Teacher Training College. I think that you can all agree from this picture that my dad was definitely punching well above his weight at this stage in his life. And my family are a super interesting bunch. Full of neurodivergent people, I had a rowdy and very bawdy upbringing, with a lot of time spent in pubs, and Chris will resonate with this, and Welsh rugby clubs. If you know Welsh culture, then in a small nation, rugby is a religion and not just a sport. My Welsh maternal grandparents, pictured here on the left, came from absolutely nothing. No money, poor housing, and often no food due to no work in their mining communities. They were from the valleys of South Wales and attended the soup kitchens to eat and survive in their youth and had no shoes to wear to school. A bit like food banks now, they had to rely on the goodwill of their own community to help them through the worst of times. The poverty was dire. Nobody should ever have to experience this level of poverty, either then or how things are now. It's the same. It shouldn't happen. The poverty in Wales during the Great Depression was unrivalled. Families were hungry and destitute. What held these families and communities together at their core was their community. If you have ever experienced poverty, being close to it, you will know. You will know how it tears the hearts out of individuals. You will know that it drives them to do things on the basis of hunger and desperation that they have no choice to do. My grandparents, and especially my nana, were an inspiration to me. Leaving South Wales for London as soon as they could when they were young, my grandparents later met in London and married. Although they'd only been brought up in Llanelli and Ammanford, which were only 14 miles apart, they had never met before. After they met and married, my grandfather joined the RAF and they travelled the world. Their social mobility journey had begun. Saving every penny possible of their income, investing in properties, they had 3 children of their own, including my mother. My grandfather, Idwal Brynwer Edwards, was a professional rugby player and played for Leicester Tigers Rugby Football Club and was later called up to play for Wales, but the Second World War interrupted his sporting debut. He was stationed with the RAF in Sri Lanka. Later, in 1957, after the war had ended and they'd survived, he was still serving in the RAF, and a stroke of luck later meant that he had a sabbatical to help a filmmaker as one of the first Hollywood set advisors. The director, David Lean, needed a parachute instructor to advise actors how to parachute into the jungle to make it realistic for a film that he was making. Anybody guess what the film is? If you're old enough, you might remember. Yeah, that film was Bridge Over the River Kwai, the multi-Oscar and Academy Award-winning movie and considered to be one of the most important wartime social history films of all time. David Lean was so impressed by my grandfather's work ethic that he wrote a speaking part into the film for my granddad with Alec Guinness and Jack Hawkins, who are pictured in this photo here. Of course, what happens each Christmas when it's on TV? We have to watch it, so I know the whole film off by heart. But what of my grandmother? My nana was a rule breaker, and dare I say it, it's probably where I get it from. She's definitely, or was always a disruptor. A fully qualified midwife, delivering babies in the community 24/7, 365, whilst raising 3 of her own children. She was once caught driving the family car on the RAF aerodrome without a driving licence, with the kids in the back of the car. Whilst this wasn't illegal, as it wasn't actually technically a public highway, it was frowned upon. My grandfather was cautioned by the commanding officer on the aerodrome to ensure his wife was strictly made aware that this was totally unacceptable. I'd like to have been a fly on the wall for that conversation when he actually told her, knowing how my nan probably would have responded. My nan also drove a moped until she was 80. She was also totally deaf by this point, so you get the idea of the force of nature she truly was in my life and within our family. A risk taker, a community builder, a totally inspiring woman with massive charisma. Back to my mum. My mum was born in Carmarthen in Wales in 1947. The same year my father on the left was born in Isleworth in London. They were later to meet at Teacher Training College at Scraptoft campus in Leicester. My nana was pivotal in encouraging my mother and myself to get an education. I was blessed. Guess what? My degree education was free in 1989. My grandmother was adamant that for a woman, the best means of progression was educating yourself as fast as possible so you could be financially independent, and it would give you options. She was an incredibly intelligent woman and way ahead of her time. My parents divorced when I was 16, so I grew up quickly, learning to be perhaps more independent than a girl should be at 16. But to be fair, you've met me. So what happened next with me? I navigated school and life as best I could as an undiagnosed neurodivergent child. In the 1970s, my mum was told by doctors to ensure that I had adequate rest and sleep and to keep me away from sugar after 3 o'clock, and everything would be tickety-boo. I looked like a boy until I was 17, and I really loved school and learning. I was bullied relentlessly as a teenager for being ginger, overweight, and basically a huge nerd, and that hasn't really changed. I wasn't any good at actually being a girl. I had zero interest in skirts and hairdos, and I just didn't get what dating was all about. I'd like to say that I didn't care, but it really hurt. It actually did. By the time I was 18, I thought I was a little bit cooler. Well, at least I thought so, but judging by this photo, maybe not. With a passion for the Smiths and Depeche Mode in music and going through a goth or now emo phase. I was finding some sense of self, but still very self-conscious, introverted and shy. Only really animated when I was performing on stage, not being myself. And my love of theatre and creative arts actually started at school, age 14. And in 1992, I graduated with a degree in creative arts from Manchester Metropolitan University, specialising in film production and writing for publication. I moved onwards quickly to my first job, which was selling cars, which taught me everything that I needed to know about sales and people. I became an assistant manager within 6 months due to the sales ability that I was showing at a very young age. But I had applied to Tesco for their graduate management scheme and won one of only 100 places on the national programme where they had received nearly 10,000 applications that year. Here I ran the first multi-million-pound grocery department at a new concept out-of-town store based up in the northwest in Macclesfield. At age 24, I helped with the new club card think tank to actually devise the club card scheme. I worked nights and ran the night team for 3 months, and I was absolutely knackered. And then there was a part of the management team for a new store opening in Burton-on-Trent, working 14 hours a day to get the store ready for new customers. I've never been afraid of hard work, but retail leaves me a bit cold now. I later moved on to Alexandra Workwear. My first major account customers, such as First Bus, Toyota and HSBC Bank, taught me to negotiate hard, work harder and be super fair, trustworthy and a good person. At this level of contract value, trust is all there is between you and your customers. Never abuse it. It's not easily won or freely given. I was then headhunted to go and work in London and head up promotional clothing accounts and sales for a company that had the brand licenses for Disney, Ferrari, and then Benetton Formula One teams, and also Carlsberg Beer and Fuller's Brewery. Life would later come full circle when Fuller's let us hold our StartUp Disruptors meetings in their pub for free at the old Customs House in Portsmouth. After redundancy from the dream job, I came south. My best friend lived in Portsmouth and said, "Hey, Portsmouth's brilliant, come to the south coast." And I briefly sold commercial radio advertising on the south coast. Here I met this man. Okay, this year we've been married for 21 years. And he is the power behind the throne, so big round of applause for my husband. By the way, it's not real money. I was then offered the job role of sales director for a radio broadcast software company based in the USA, but redundancy struck again, and then I went to work in power generation for a couple of companies, working my last role with the amazing Ashley Benfield, who's got the most wonderful smile, Ashley has, who is here today, and he does know genuinely where all the bodies are buried. I left P&I, inspired by Ashley's father, Paul Benfield, although he doesn't know this, to start up and thought, well, you know, how hard can starting a business actually be? This is where the trouble began. In 2015, after a meaningful and high-level corporate career, startup was like the Wild West, lawless, full of people exploiting one another financially, taking advantage of women and the vulnerable, really not a great place to be, in essence, a bit of a shit show. So what needed to be done? As a super nerd, research was the answer. Can't beat the data ender, can you? Can't beat the data ven, can you? You just can't. I went specifically to 268 networking events locally. They were all rubbish. I read a lot of statistical data about the local economy. Yes, I do need to get out more, I know. I was doing some ad hoc consulting work for engineering SMEs to help them with sales and growth. Then the world span off its axis when I met my work husband, Peter Hooley. I met Peter Hooley at the University of Portsmouth around 2012, and he gave me my first real break in consulting by helping the university to write a sales strategy to fill the innovation space with startups and fledgling entrepreneurial businesses. In 9 months, we had a 500% sales uplift, and it was full. Pete and I do talk a lot. That's how we're built. The local business support from the public sector, luckily for us, was actually pretty dire at the time, and it was run by advisors that had never started or run a business, and I couldn't understand why there was no founder-to-founder-led community in the mix. So a small group of us held a pub meeting to see if we could work out what was needed to change the landscape permanently. It was a windy day. It's Portsmouth. We started with 9 people in the pub, and later we actually got inundated. So we moved to the Fuller's Brewery pub at the old Customs House in Gunwharf Quays because we just couldn't fit everybody into the room. Ali was attending the meetings at this time, so she'll know that we literally went from a few people to a lot of people very, very quickly. Obviously, this was pre-COVID. We did many things during this time, but for me it was about looking after our community. After meeting Ali Shillimore and hearing the tale of hell that she didn't like going to networking events because she felt socially anxious as a mother and didn't want to go into the room, I thought, this is just really rubbish. We've got to do something about this. We've got to change it. But it was always for me about the community. So what else happened? Well, we were doing stuff with the University of Portsmouth Entrepreneur Society. This is actually in this room. And we've actually helped the Entrepreneur Society here for around a decade now with outreach and actually helping to support some of the best graduate businesses that we've actually built from the university. But I actually thought we're still in its infancy. We need some more help. Who can we ask? Who understands? Who really gets disruption in a city that's actually quite formal and quite naval and quite staid and really loves the status quo? This dude. So, anybody got any idea who this guy is? Probably the answer is no. This guy was the head of cities for Uber. They were the new kid on the block in our city, and I needed help, support and insights. And I wrote a book to process all that was rapidly happening in my brain and basically stay sane. And a copy of the book is in the bag today that you're going to take away with you. I am a true believer that life sends you the right helpers at the right time. And Fred Jones now went from being head of UK cities to UK general manager within 6 months. He gave me Uber's offices in Southampton and Portsmouth to hold meetings for free with StartUp Disruptors and continue to research the local markets. We also helped in return get the word out through his sponsoring us that actually Uber were in town because they were up against a very big legacy company called Aquacars. I always say it doesn't matter what the outcome is in business, you should always trust a man that can finish a calzone pizza the size of that one in one sitting. So who else did we ask for help at this time? See, this is what we're about. We actually asked Rob. He was actually the head of the office at Base Point in Chichester. And we recruited more and more people and more places to hold meetings and just asked them to sponsor us. And by this point, they were. But I was running it on a shoestring, still am, running it for free. And I needed to work out if I had any sense of being able to turn this into a business. At this stage, I had no funding. I was a woman and visited the local growth hub, and basically the door was slammed in my face. I asked for help from all the usual channels. The door was slammed in my face. Nobody would help. Nobody wanted to know. This story was not unique. From women and the neurodivergent and from minorities and non-native English speakers, I was hearing the same story over and over again. To me, again, unacceptable. I had to change it. So without telling Dan, I decided to remortgage the house. 1 month later, after remortgaging the house, I got a personal loan, also not telling Dan. I'm surprised he's actually still married to me. I figured if you want to win and you want to help people, then you need to do it yourself. You need to bet on yourself. I knew if you want to win and help to change things that you need to take unprecedented risk. These risks mean taking chances and doing things that others are not able or are unwilling to do. So you keep building, you keep building, you keep building. Then Mr. Robinson appeared on the scene. This was my second office actually at Ferrum Innovation Centre. After a 31-year sales career, the calculated risks that I take bring people into my life who are just the most amazing people that I've ever met in the world. If women's businesses were correctly funded and supported by people like Guy, who has actually put his money where his mouth is, then we would place £250 billion per annum into the UK economy. So let's be clear here. The royal family puts £2.5 billion into the local economy in the UK each year. If we funded women's businesses correctly, it would be 250 billion. Let's just let that land for a minute. Less than 3% of venture capital money goes to women, and an even smaller proportion of that to neurodivergent women. And these are all figures from the Rose Review via NatWest. So what was I doing at this time? I kept building from 9 people to 100 people to 1,800 in a Facebook group in less than 12 months, to now in excess of 5,000 startups helped by everything that we're doing. But yeah, it's hard work. It's knackering. But there are some good times. In 2018, I was nominated for my work in gender parity in business in the UK and became one of Sky News 100 Women in Business. Inspired by the Spice Girls on set, to keep momentum after making it through from 10,000 nominees, I attended on International Women's Day to accept our award. I kept on building, holding pub meetings and building the community using social media for amplification. It's the only way that we could get the word out. So we kept building, building, building. meaning that by 2020, Pete and I had made Portsmouth the #1 entrepreneurial city in the UK from the work in our community, backed by the sponsorship of the university. That's no mean feat. We'd done in 4.5 to 5 years what other cities have never achieved in the UK. But then what happened? COVID. During COVID, I took time out, my health took a hard hit, and I suffered from long COVID, having 18 months in bed and off sick, and phasing back into work after surgery from an underlying condition. It was a time to reflect on what I was building, whether it was worth it, whether it really mattered, and also to know that I was actually heading down the right pathway at all. I also provided free help to other businesses in our group at this time. Because my thumbs were still working on the mobile phone and I could post on social media whilst I was flat on my back, I just kept growing the group. I used YouTube to ask our startups to share knowledge and ask them to help others with their knowledge and support one another. I knew that they were facing going to the wall, tough times and financial ruin. I offered free advice and more free advice. And also funding and signposting to council and UK government support and resources. Back to how we started off this presentation. All I could think of during this time was the fact that my grandparents had once fought hard for their survival and our community now needed my help to survive. So we opened up the online Facebook group and I was holed up in North Wales helping as much as I could for free as I was recovering. As the pandemic eased, we were still in uncertain times, but in 2022 I was named one of TechCrown's Women in Technology to Watch, and I'm still the only one outside London, and I don't know why that is. In 2023, we're building out the new relationships with some amazing sponsors who are here with us today, so thank you for that gift. I am really, truly blessed. We are now market leaders in the UK, because nobody else is bonkers enough to do this, for building communities and incubators for universities, SMEs and corporates, both online and offline. Helping each other is critical to our survival. We reach 50,000 SMEs and startups online through social media every week. I'm now a top 3% influencer in this space in the UK on LinkedIn, having started building audience on LinkedIn in 2004 when everybody said this internet thing would never catch on. Having been coached by some of the best in the world has been definitely an advantage. I would like to announce today that we were really, really happy also to have LV Insurance with us as one of our partners. So a round of applause to Ven and Sam for believing in me. Thank you so much. And also, I just want to mention on this slide, my local MP, Stephen Morgan, who's the Shadow Minister for Schools, who's been with me since I babbled on about this in 2015. And he does still give me looks like I still haven't got a clue what you're talking about, but I'm happy to support you because I'm a male ally. Our next steps are to build a tech platform with ideation and partnership with the University of Portsmouth and corporate partners for launch. This guy has been pivotal, and you've probably never seen him, never met him, and you don't even know who he is yet. This guy is Chris Topman. He's the partner in Notion Venture Capital in London. He invited me to a dinner in Soho on LinkedIn, having never met me. And when I told Dan that I was going, Dan said, "So you've been approached by a total stranger on LinkedIn to go to a dinner in Soho and you've never met him?" And he said, "Yeah, feel free to go. I know you'll get it right." So Chris has been really pivotal in helping us shape our ideation since day one and has been in the wings. So thank you to Chris, who's also one of our partners at StartUp Disruptors. We're now in excess of 50 plus partners and sponsors that we actually deal with across the UK and internationally. The next one is this guy. Anybody know who this guy is? Ben? Charlie? Yeah, Gary V. So I'm lucky and blessed enough to have been invited by a guy called Ben Ruby to meet Gary V in London. Vane and Media are one of our sponsors, and they're one of the biggest, in fact, the biggest media agencies in New York City in the world. He is my mentor. I've attended sessions with him to help us grow our business, and they're specialists also in SME business growth. So we've already scaled using third-party social media and platforms, and now we're actually moving to the secondary stage of ideation to grow our business. Our aim and our mission is to help 10 million businesses, both in the UK and in emerging markets, to get the best entrepreneurial advice, education on a subscription basis by learning and accreditation backed by the best business schools, including Portsmouth, and hopefully when I can talk them into it, the University of Surrey, for a fraction of the cost of a degree and undergraduate programme. Our sponsors and supporters will be part of building the first and largest online non-governmental startup and business incubator with unrivaled access to data, brand exposure, and also become disruptors in their own fields and operations and market verticals. What I wanted to say is thank you to all these people. I haven't got enough room on the screen to put all the logos up. Faster Capital, who are a tech incubator in Dubai, have worked with us and actually helped us fund some of our startups. Notion and Chris in London, LV, our new joiners, UK Business Angels Association, Sasha Group and VaynerMedia in New York City, and the University of Portsmouth Business School. Also Funding Circle, Swish Fund, Uber, and the University of Sussex. Thank you so much. The whole list of our sponsors is available on our website. What I want to say is, a last word to my family before we close. Nan, we've come a long way from the Valleysbach, but we will never forget the feeling of the grass under our feet, the grass of the green, green grass of home, as Tom Jones once sang. Thank you for being with me. Thank you for being you. Thank you to all my sponsors and supporters, and those especially that have taken part in this startup giveaway and actually launching into the unknown off the back of a fag packet with me. I do appreciate it. I wish everybody in this room joy and success, whatever your journey in business and whoever you are. And thank you for being with me today. I really do appreciate it. Big love. You know me, keep it short. So thank you very much for listening to that. I think I should just rename it Hideous Hairstyles Through the Decades. But there we go. So thank you very much for listening.